Hello, angels. Um, Happy new moon in Leo. I'm gonna try this. I'm recording, so I am still recording these videos on Zoom and then uploading them to YouTube like a real unbranded human, not taking their job nearly seriously enough. And no, I'm thinking about this in this Leo new moon about how sometimes you need to get a little fancy, like step up the glamour. But only thinking about it, I'm not acting in this way yet, because I think that's kind of what characterizes all of these new moon videos that I've made, is that they are in the realm of thought things to a degree. The other thing that characterizes them is they're all about love, which was not purposeful, but now I think I might, like, if that's where the spirit moves, then maybe I will keep talking about love and astrology and the stars and perhaps some spirituality too. I did though, I made an outline today for what it is that I wanted to talk about during this Leo new moon, and I'm going to see about this. And then also there's something else that's just like really coming up for me, and it is in regards to Israel, and a New York Times article that I read a couple days ago about segregation, like sex segregation in Israel. So men and women, that this is something that some of the, or like the more traditional Orthodox, the Orthodox Jews, it's more common practice for them to separate male and female in public life. But then, from what I understand from the few people that I've talked to who have either lived in or visited Israel, there's also like parts that are like really what I might call like gender progressive or something along these lines, like liberal. Actually, liberal might not even be the word that I would like to use there, but just like it wouldn't be a problem if you wanted to ride on the same train car as me, which apparently that was something that happened, is that there's a woman and her child who was prevented from getting on a certain like train car because there were men, Orthodox Jews. And this is concerning to me. I'm going to tell you why too. So I have never been to Israel. I do not have, well, okay, my great aunt, she immigrated to the United States during World War II when she was a little girl, and she was a Jew, a Jewish woman, and she adopted a baby who was born to a Jewish mother because she was like she was an observant practicing Jew. She ended up later in her life, after teaching in a synagogue here in Alabama, converting to Protestant religion. Okay, and then she identified herself as a Messianic Jew, because I think, again, I'm speaking out of, I'm from what I have observed. I'm not speaking of my own experience, but from what I understand, there is a tradition among Jewish people that it doesn't really matter if you have been baptized or like claim to be a Christian or a Messianic Jew. They don't recognize that because it's something about like heritage and like you are this and you can never not be. Okay. That's a little okay. So here's the thing. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church in Alabama. And I always really, I mean, this was kind of part of it. Like, we understood that Israel and the Jewish people were our friends and allies, okay? In this church that I grew up in, this was the largest church in a very like transient, educated college town in Alabama. So please, if we can, refrain from the stereotypes a bit. Like, this isn't like rural countryside, and like it's different, okay? And I love rural countryside churches too, like however. But as part of that, like the feeling that I had, and this is the only way that I want to talk about my own experience, not speculate about other people's experience. The feeling that I had as a child learning about the existence of Israel and of the Jewish people was one of great like admiration. I thought that they were like the cool, the older brother kind of like my more relaxed, kind of casual, cultural lifestyle Christianity. Okay. So it's like, I am kind of a traditionalist. I think I've mentioned this before. I really I find order and these things like up to be liberating for me. It can be hard for me to kind of like just loosen up, and whatever. So I just thought and I enjoy kind of classical works of art, just real kind of prototypical expressions of, or prototypical for my culture as a white woman in Alabama, expressions of beauty in the world. And I perceived Israel and the Jewish people to be kind of like a shining beacon of what the goal was. Like, these people must have been really close to God. Like, that was my perception. So what is happening in Israel right now is like truly, well, I mean, I'm older now, like, and a lot has happened, and I've gone through several transformations and gained new understandings of faith and spiritual life. And so what is happening right now is of interest to me because I think it mirrors what happened in the Southern Baptist Church that I grew up in some ways, which is like this cultural distinction between men and women that disempowers women in an extraordinary way, but that it's very difficult to articulate that because because we just reference the word of the Lord, and then you don't have to take accountability for your actions in causing harm to women. You can just say that you're obeying the word of the Lord, and then conversation is over. And if a woman wants to like get hysterical about that, then that's clearly her problem. That's kind of one way to do it. And that was how it was done in the Southern Baptist Church. And that's why I don't think that I know any women who were raised in the church that I grew up in who still attend that church. And very few of like the more kind of, the Yeah, if you want to call it like the prominent families of Tuscaloosa, very few of them attend that church any longer. And so talking about this right now because it pains me to see now like how extreme things are becoming. And that this is a true like act of what I would call spiritual warfare against women that is being perpetuated by orthodox and more like dogmatic expressions of Judeo-Christian faith. So, okay. Yeah, it's just a little precursor here. What the outline that I wrote and what I wanted to talk about was about dignity and freedom, and how dignity actually cannot exist outside of the freedom that we have to choose for ourselves the kind of life that we will live. One thing about the experience that I had as a woman raised in a Southern Baptist church with people that I respected and still do, was one of embarrassment bordering on humiliation, because of the shame that I felt for just not being for being a sinner. And here is what is true about humiliation. Humiliation can only occur when we are betraying ourselves in order to uphold the worldviews and perspectives of other people. So for children, this is different, but as an adult, I would be humiliated to go into a Southern Baptist church because they've now voted to I guess like kick out of the Southern Baptist Association every church that recognizes women as part of their leadership, whether that's like as deacons or pastors or whatever the thing is. So for me, as someone who's spent so much time studying different theological principles, issues, like whatever the thing is, and who takes these things very seriously. Although I will joke. I love a joke, love a good joke, love a little sarcasm every now and then. Lighten up, Jesus can take it, truly. But it would be humiliating for me to go into one of those churches and to position myself beneath the authority of a man simply because I'm a woman. I don't know you. You're not my husband. You're not my father. You're not. Why? Just because you are a man, do you think that you deserve to be in a position of authority over me? That's my question. And that's why I don't go to Southern Baptist churches. So like, it's fine. Anyway, okay, so when you have total control over a person, which could also be called totalitarianism. That is the same thing as total humiliation, total, like, we might use the term, like, psychoanalytic term, castration of that person, tying their hands behind their back and saying, climb the ladder, like that's the equivalent. And then as they attempt to do it, you're laughing at them because you're like, look, you can't do it. And it's like, yeah, because you tied my hands behind my back. Like, what do you mean? Okay, so here's the thing. There is, and because I know I've read and I've been actually told all of the reasons why actually this isn't harmful to you. And every time I'm told this, most of the time I'm told it's a man who's telling me that this actually is not harmful for me. It's actually very respectful, even though I feel humiliated by the way that you're respecting me. There's something called plurality, which is different than diversity. Plurality is when we recognize and make the choice to celebrate, not just tolerate. This isn't tolerance, this is celebration of irreconcilable individual differences between me and my neighbor. We are never going to be the same. We are never going to perfectly agree on this thing. We're never going to look exactly the same. We're never going to speak exactly the same. We're never going to have the exact same experience communing with God. And instead of that being a problem, people who choose to celebrate plurality see that as a gift. And why would we see this as a gift? Well, the reason that I see this as a gift is because I live with the faith that every human being is connected to every other human being in the depth of our soul. That consciousness originates from one source, and that source is God. Supreme being. And so when I encounter another person in the world, whether that person is a man or a woman, a child or an elderly person, Black person, brown person, white person, educated person, whatever. And I love neurodiversity. I think autism is gonna like save the world. All of these things, like, it's the reason that I choose that is because it's just another way to see the beauty of our shared existence in the world. Like, that's what empathy is. Empathy and pity, honeys, two very different things. Empathy is perspective taking for the purpose of affirming and celebrating the radically distinct experience of someone else. Pity is when you say, sure, you can come hang out with us because don't you want to be just like me? No, I don't do pity. And I don't want pity from anyone else either. And okay, so let's see. And truly, okay, so we accept that we are not the same, but that the same drive toward being, what Esther Perel calls the erotic drive toward life, and what I would call like unity with God. that animates every person's existence in the world. Each little singularity, we're all animated by the same drive toward being alive. The reason that we know this is because without that drive, we would just cease to exist. And so that's what, like, depression, the like not being able to find the motivation to continue, and also suicide, like actually making the choice not to continue to exist. Both of those things, like, that's how we know that if we're not experiencing those things, that we're going to be animated by the same drive toward being alive. The same drive, but just through a kaleidoscope of different possibilities of how that's actually going to play out in the world that we are all sharing together. How we choose, the choices that we make actually, I'll say this. The things that shape our experience of this God, of being, of this drive toward life, those are the things that make our history, that constitute our history. There's, in phenomenology and some other, like maybe social psychology, or just to a degree, like it's interdisciplinary, but we call it body memory. And it's this idea that, like, we as individuals are made up of like remembrances of everything that we've ever experienced in the world, and that's what makes us unique. And that actually, and some people might even call it like the subconscious mind or something like that, but that is driving a lot of our actions in the world. But when you get to a place where you're able to see kind of the accumulation of your lived past as relevant to where you are in the present moment, but not predictive of where you will be in the next present moment, then you're living a life of freedom, and you're living a life of agentic choice. You have the agency to choose for yourself what your next move will be. It is only when you get to that point, and it takes honesty, self-honesty, truly. It's not always easy, because you have to look with clear eyes at where you are and how you got there. And but it's only after doing that you can really make a real choice about what your next step in the world will be. And if we are not living kind of from moment to moment in that place, then yes, we will leave behind a history, but we will not leave behind a legacy. It will just be what happened to us and not what we did about it. And I think that it's from that living a legacy that real power, fulfillment, and like love and joy can really come to kind of indwell the human being, which is just truly amazing. Okay, so how does this relate back to where I started with what's happening right now in Israel and with women and women in the church? Well, here's the thing. A person who would attempt to take away a person's right to choose for themselves what kind of life they will live, what kind of choices they will make, where they will put their body in the next moment or in this moment. A person who will do that has no respect for human dignity, because they also probably aren't living from a very dignified place themselves. And likely they're not yet able to admit this to themselves. Self-delusion, let's say this, self-delusion and self-preservation often feel like they are intricately tied together. But the other part of that is that it feels like you are gonna drown at any minute. Like the ship could sink. There's not safety there. And so you grasp tighter and tighter onto the little bit that you have until it becomes so obvious that, like, you are stressed about this. Why does it mean so much to you? And that's a question you should ask. There are, however, a few people who don't experience this, who have no shame, who are not embarrassed by their actions, even though the reality shows that what you're doing is very undignified, disrespectful, and kind of crazy. But a person who cannot accept that, who is just going to remain firm in their position and say, well, the reason is that men and women were just created different by God, and you just can't be here, you can't do this, or whatever the thing is. Just like a person, so a person who cannot be embarrassed, a person who has no ability to, like, blush at a situation and be like, oh no, I didn't want you to know that part, or like, this isn't the part that I wanted to share, like, who has no desire to have a private life of the mind or of the soul. Those are the same people who can never really know what it means to live a dignified life. Because our dignity, like I said, comes from the ability that we have to choose for ourselves the kind of life that we will live and what parts of that life we want to share with others. And so the invasion of privacy, and that's another thing that is a specialty of Israel, is invading the private lives of individuals. I think right now it's, it goes through the courts as we're going to be able to electronically monitor the lives of men or people who have been convicted of, like, domestic abuse or something. And so it's, like, framed in this way that it's like, this is to protect the women that can't ride in the same train cars as us. But the reality is the hyper monitoring of an individual person's life is the same thing as the destruction of their freedom to choose for themselves the kind of life that they live, and the removal of that person's dignity. So, honeys, seems like there's a real issue at hand. And it also seems that the people in Israel are, I heard they're in the streets. I don't know. and by in the streets, I mean that they're really pushing back against this and saying like, this is not us, this is not representative of the kind of people that we are. But they're fighting a fight right now, and not just for themselves, but for the future of freedom loving people all over the world. And you think it doesn't matter until it absolutely does. So this is the message of the new moon in Leo. Not exactly what I intended, but you know, the moon is the feminine, and the fixed fire of the sun, the Leo energy. Like, sometimes you got to listen to the women tell you what the issue really is, with all due respect and dignity. So, happy new moon.